had this great professor at Wharton, Russell Acuff, and he used to say that the future has a design and we have to redesign it. And I'd like to say that the content internet has a design and we need to redesign it. What's wrong with it? How did it get this way? What can it be? And how do we get started redesigning it? This is my father. He was an electrical engineer. His father's an electrical engineer. My brother's an electrical engineer. My husband's an engineer. His father's an engineer. I guess you could say my father was also a geek, a hacker. He hacked radios and radar. And I gave a commencement address this spring at the University of Michigan School of Art, where I went to school, and I had to dig back through that history and discovered something that's been kind of on my mind ever since. I got a big laugh because I told the story about leaving for school and driving myself, and my father was literally on our front porch waving his fist, yelling, "I'm not paying for this." And that was true. And it was true because I was really good at science and math, and that's not a surprise because we got grilled on square roots at the dinner table, and we had to learn the right way to do everything. And when it came time to go to college, he really wanted me to go to Michigan Tech, General Motors Tech, where they train all the designers, and I didn't want to go. So this was the 70s, and I lived in Detroit, and he worked for General Motors. And General Motors was the biggest company in the world. They employed 877,000 employees. Yeah, wow. The big three, Detroit made 85% of the world's cars, and General Motors made half of those. So my dad was a super geek. He worked in a private secret lab. He brought home all these pre-production cars. They were very proud of the fact that General Motors invented the first mechanical heart pump. They had concept cars that drove themselves. He started as a company man in the 40s, and he worked for 35 years, and he thought General Motors was a high priesthood and could do no wrong. It's hard to imagine. Maybe it's not that hard to imagine. Sounds kind of similar. But this was the 70s, and I was in high school, and Vietnam was bitterly winding down. We were teens, and we were passionate about human rights and women's rights and anybody's rights. And the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland was literally burning. We had Earth Day and oil embargoes, and gasoline went from 36 cents a gallon to 87 cents a gallon on my allowance. That was a big deal. And so my dad and I fought. He wanted me to design cars, but my dad's Silicon Valley looked a lot like big tobacco to me, and it was literally the last place I wanted to work. My dad's GM looked like this. My GM looked like that. How the hell did that happen? Detroit, like Silicon Valley, was synonymous with a single industry, the automotive alley. The Great Decline, the world didn't actually stop buying cars. Detroit stopped making cars that people wanted to buy. You often hear the reference to 30 years of bad decisions. That's kind of a blunt criticism. I wouldn't have called it such at the time, but looking back on it, I would say it was 30 years of engineering-led decisions. Women drivers were the brunt of jokes. A car could never be too fast or too big. Detroit highways were fine. The cars weren't too big. Other people needed to build better highways. And in 1970, Detroit made the best Corvette ever. So General Motors didn't change, and car companies moved in from all over the world. General Motors went from making 35% of the world's cars to 10%. In 2009, General Motors filed Chapter 11. Detroit is a parable of success and failure and hope. I've been in communications tech for over 20 years, and what I want to say is that there was a lot of exciting and wonderful things being done at the beginning of that, but now when I look at the part of the world I work in, I think it's awful kind of sick too. So we're in pretty poor health. We're drowning in our own tunnel vision. We have big tail fins and the equivalent of gas guzzlers. It's been an engineering-led business model that needs to change, and it's a business that's having some tragic impact off the internet balance sheets as well. They used to say, as goes General Motors, so goes the country. I'm not afraid to say that the health and diversity of our media has a similar impact on the country. But this is good news. The time is right for some fresh thinking and a redesign. First, a distinction. When I talk about the content internet, I'm not talking about search like Google or services like OpenTable or shopping like Fab. These are all great sectors and great businesses. I'm talking about the businesses like entertainment, things that used to be print, books, media, maybe some blogs, maybe some peer-to-peer media. This is what I'm referring to as the content internet. So what's wrong with it and why the poor diagnosis? Well, there are more and more important reasons, but here are 3 economic reasons. The first is that it's a great loss of economic value. What used to be $22 in primetime television for media is 50 cents on Facebook. That's more than a 95% decline in GDP right there. So the same eyeballs, a lot less money. These click-through rates are going down. When I started, they were about $3. They're as little as 3 cents and sometimes 1/10 of a cent. So we're converting what used to be a high-value property into relatively low-value properties. The second is the loss of privacy. This is a subject for a whole talk, but let's just say we should all be significantly interested in the fact that a lot of our personal information is being sold off literally for millicents. And the third reason is that 95% economic loss is really taking away the jobs of this creative class that's probably sitting in this room right here. So these are writers, journalists, producers, educators. These are the people that are losing that income. So how to get to be this way? It's about 15 years old, and in about a 2-minute review, it looks something like this. Ironically, there's one extremely dominant content business model called advertising that's combined with a fundamental misunderstanding of and dislike for advertising. So the companies kind of go like this. They say, we're going to make X. X will be cool. People will love free X. How will it make money? Advertising. But this was always problematic because on the internet, inventory is literally infinite. You can type in a search and a website will be manufactured to meet your interest. It's infinite. So when inventory is infinite, it doesn't bode well for price. Advertising demand is not infinite. So this is a race to the bottom, and it's been going on since the internet started. So not to beat a dead horse, there's some real bad science and some self-serving memes out there as well. There are lots of them. I'll pick on 3. One is that my favorite, information wants to be free. I think that means so that technology can be expensive. But I'd like to just convert it to first class wants to be free because I would get more benefit out of that meme. I think the idea that information wants to be free is just, it's a choice or a saying that a lot of people agreed to promote. That we'll have a paper just for you. We've been at this 15 years, and I think I have 20 of those. That's, I think, the internet's version of a jetpack, not happening. The idea that young people are a completely different species, not true. I saw a presentation this week about the young millennials, and they're a lot more like the pre-millennials than the millennials. And young people's characteristics have kind of swung back and forth between a lot of things over the years. And if you study them over time, you'll see that the news about who they are and what they're afraid of is not quite as alarming as people make it out to be. So what I'm proposing to you is that the current business model for the media internet is weak and deeply flawed. So now I have to bring this back to Detroit, to the original STEM city. And I know I'm in trouble now, and I have to inoculate myself again and say that I'm not an anti-STEMite. I love science. I come from an engineering family. I almost won the science fair in Detroit. So this is something that's very dear to me. But STEM is constructed as an exclusionary environment. It contains 4 things. I didn't define it, they define it. It's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's a tribe, and it has a lot of shared values and shared beliefs. It may be great for making heart machines or colliders, but it's not necessarily for making culture, politics, or education. So I don't know about you, but I would like to see some buds with my stems. So beauty, unity, design, service. I think there are a lot of other characteristics and studies that could be incorporated. People who choose STEM have shared training values, strengths, and weaknesses. You know, you can come out of engineering school with having taken 4 classes that are not in engineering, and you can come out of engineering school without having taken any. And to be fair, you can also come out of art school without taking many electives and elect into a very similar kind of microcosm and be isolated as well. But this STEM culture tends to be thinner on the human sciences like psychology and writing and philosophy and critical thinking and marketing. And this is more important than it might sound. These tribes often tend to dislike marketing and advertising. They call it a black art, they disparage it, and they want to replace it with algorithms. And this has been a real limiter on business model thinking. So maybe, just maybe, we've had a STEM culture making general culture and media companies without certain kinds of human insights, ideas, or demand creation capabilities in their wheelhouses. They've made the things they can make, warts and all, disrupted, aggregated, automated, scraped, displayed, and many times delighted us. But now it's time for some more inclusive thinking. Thankfully, this isn't Detroit, and the barriers and entry costs to media are much lower. So it's time to imagine more, bigger, better things that combine the best of technology and the best of media. Things that are original, well-made, enduring, beautifully produced, well-researched, fluid, engaging, and worth paying for. Paid for not just because we want to, but because like a Kickstarter investment or a great pair of shoes, media can make us happy, smarter, more appealing to ourselves and to others. We can get ideas, knowledge, options, better government, and even hope. All those human, cultural, civic, emotional things. So how do we get STEM to blossom? How do we get a better content internet? One that gets high quality content paid for somehow. Because if you're not paying, you are the product. And as a product, you're being sold for pennies. That's where I get the paywall groan. When I was in cable, they called it pay-per-view, and nobody wanted it for 10 years. Then it became on-demand. That wasn't so bad. Now it's called Netflix, Hulu, or Boo-Boo, and we all want it. So don't let people call it paywall. Assign your own names. I think premium is perfectly fine. And let other people stop characterizing these new business ideas. And I can also say that despite all the complaints about cable television, we have a renaissance in TV programming that's caused by cable prices and all that bundling. And while most of us don't want to pay those prices, we don't want to give up the programming either. And some of those criticisms are a little bit over the top as well. So in order for this to change, 2 things have to happen. We have to get even more dissatisfied. Luckily, this is well underway. There's a lot of fright about what this privacy means to us as individuals, and there are certainly revenue problems. Digital display advertising does not work very well. Social media advertising does not work very well, and it's particularly annoying on mobile. A friend of mine in the business said recently that the cavalry is not coming over the mountain. That doesn't mean that social media is not going to find other business models. They will. I know some people who really, really believe that algorithms are on the cusp of predicting human behavior as rational as my want for shoes, but they're just not. Behind all this optimism is a persistent set of flawed premises about humans and desire. So we just need to think of some cool stuff, and we have to make it, and we have to sell it. And yes, it has to be a lot better than free, maybe 3 times better, and it's not that easy. We have sacred cows. It can be hard to tell the baby from the bathwater. The flow of media is profoundly different and permanent. Attention's changing, tastes are changing. Prices have to be right, payments have to be effortless, sharing is a given, service is a thrill, it has to be great. Maybe you thought I was going to talk about information design, but I'm talking about business model design. I look at Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Amanda Palmer, angel investing, and I see a lot of people who are willing to spend money on new business models that are right-minded and care about things that are well-made, just as there have always been. Do you see how hard these entrepreneurs work to bring people into their business models and into their sense of worth? That's what we all have to do. I worked with publishers for a while, and about promotion, they said, oh, we can't afford that. Besides, we know who buys books, and they buy as many books as they're going to buy. Really? promotion is actually something that's supposed to make sales happen. It's not an expense. And if you can't charge, you have to charge for marketing, and marketing and discovery online might not look much like a book tour. So what might have to change and who profits from what might have to change is who profits from the discovery and the intellectual property. What does a paid content internet look like? Hard to say. All you can eat? Maybe. One low price? Maybe. Piecemeal like a daily newsstand? Maybe. Tiny payments? Maybe. All of the above? Probably. At Citia, we're inspired by the city itself. There's a free public sphere. Anyone can use the streets, a park, or a walk. You can hire transportation, rent a table, yet complex options for free and paid and cheap and expensive live side by side with the help of some urban planning, architecture, regulation, and social contracts. It is impossible to imagine that our exobrain, or the technium as Kevin Kelly calls it, can function the same way. Isn't that the kind of diversity that represents our real diversity? This is Minecraft. This is a construction made out of fake plastic blocks like Legos, and it's a reproduction of the city of New York. It's all made out of distinct little cubes, each with locations and properties. I imagine an internet like this, with content objects, a vast landscape of marketplace of ideas, facts, opinions, images, and diagrams, movies, articles, jokes, where the makers and owners are permanently connected to their work like a cookie attaches to a browser. Connections are free, media objects flow, media objects can be free or paid, creator's choice, user's choice. Digital pages were kind of dumb like paper, but content objects like our cards can be smart. Citia cards can stay connected to a database and can travel in and out of social and mobile and media environments. Through attributes, they know who they belong to and where they can go. But in this case, it's a content graph, not a social graph. We're the hunter, not the prey. Jared Lanier had another business model based on getting us each paid for our data. That might also work too. But whatever sets of models we experiment with, we have to sell them. And I'm sorry if that's unpleasant or expensive, but it's not going to happen any other way. When I talk to an audience like this, I assume nearly everyone here is in the business of making content or some kind of IP or distributing it. It's up to us to appreciate the value of each other's work and to advocate for the value of everybody's work. Everything we do, and one final thing, none of us is in this, none of us can sit this one out. Because on the internet, everything is noticed. All is recorded. We've talked about the dark side of accountability, but there's a bright side too. Everything we do is a vote, everything gets counted. When you buy Angry Birds, it gets counted. When you decide not to pay for the organization that fields reporters in Syria, that gets counted. Everything you're doing is designing the internet we will get. We all vote. We vote 100 times a day, and whether we like it or not, it counts. My dad was a sound engineer. He used to say, Linda, this room is filled with waves, music all around us, and all we need are the right receivers to pick them up. He used to hold up a transistor radio and marvel at it. It was all magic that he and his buddies, I don't have a transistor radio, but I have this. Magic that he and his buddies were imagining and making. He didn't live to see Spotify or the iPhone, but I know that there's a little bit of him in here. Do you ever think about how many thousands of engineers are in here? They didn't make the music. They made the music possible, and I'm very grateful. We have 100 amazing tools and options brought to us by many generations of inventors. We've only begun to scratch the surface. I have no idea what we're all going to make, but I'm certain it's going to take a village, a diverse village, maybe even a city. Thanks for your generous attention.